Good morning, everyone. This is Superintendent Mike Morris, and thank you for joining us for this morning Family Start Time Town Hall. Really appreciate you starting your day with us, or starting part of your day with us. What we're gonna do is just do some introductions. We'll go through some slides, but the bulk of the time, we'll say to end by 10. If not a couple minutes earlier, we'll be really focused on Q&A and getting questions out. So I'm Mike Morris. I'll turn it over to Victoria to introduce herself.
Hi, my name is Victoria Stewart. I'm the athletic director for the high school and middle school.
Great. And Diego?
Hi, my name is Diego Sharon, and I'm the principal at the middle school.
And Mickey?
Hi, I'm Mickey Gurmacki, assistant principal at the high school.
And Derek?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Derek Shea. I'm the principal at Crocker Farm.
And Sam?
Hi, I'm Sam Camera, the interim assistant principal at Amherst High.
And Marta, we're just doing quick introductions.
Hi, this is Marta Guevara, Director of Student and Family Engagement.
And I'm going to have these guys fade into the green room for a bit because we're going to do some slides. But before we do, the way to put a question or comment in the chat is at the lower right-hand corner. You should see that there's a little empty box, and you can put questions or comments in there. So just so everyone feels comfortable, if you do feel comfortable, just saying, because what I'm finding is once people can put something in there once, then we don't have to deal with the technical challenges later. What's your favorite ice cream flavor? I know it's weird to think about ice cream this time of year, but people put in their favorite ice cream flavor. I'll do so myself. This one at Flavor is really good. I think it's called, now I'm going to blank on the name. It's been a couple months since I've been there. But if you are able to put some comments in the chat, then we know that you can put things in your chat. Not everyone's in the mood for ice cream. That's okay, but just wanted to at least give everyone that thank you very much, Carrie. Not my favorite flavor, but I'm glad you're participating. So we just want to make sure that everyone knows how to put questions in again, because much of this hour will be listening and responding to questions, much less about presentation. One other thing as we're getting organized and going that I'm going to put is the presentation for today. It's going to go out. Thank you. Now we can see in some other ones. Pear sorbet. That sounds good. I've not had that one. We're just going to put the link to the presentation also in the chat. So if you are looking for that, you can follow along. I'll be presenting it, but it is a public access document, so people are willing to access it that way as well. All right, at this point, I'm going to pull some of our good folks off. They'll be back on later responding to questions, but I'm going to put the presentation up, and they'll be in the green room during this time. And share my screen. And there we are. I think this will make it a little bit easier to view. So again, today's topic is about start times. So I'm going to go over some background, some history, and then what's being considered this year. I think it's really worth noting before we get to the next slide that this is not a new conversation in this community. This kind of comes up every couple of years. There was a major effort in 2011, 2012 with a 50 some odd page report that was incredibly well done, and everything that's in the report is still true now. There's more data to back it, but there was plenty of data then as well. So this is not a new conversation in this community or many communities in Massachusetts. It is something that we are exploring for the start of the next school year, and we'll talk a little bit about why in a second. So just starting with the research and implications of later start time for secondary school students in particular. In our district, secondary school starts in 7th grade. So the first bullet point, students are more likely to get adequate sleep. What research would show about 2/3 to 3/4 of the additional time that folks get, if we have a later start time that students get, will be dedicated to sleep. I think there's some myths out there that if you start an hour later, that the kids will just stay up an hour later, and evidence shows that about 3/4 of that they'll spend sleeping, and about 25% of that they'll spend staying up later. So it does actually involve more sleep. Secondly, the outcomes seem better. There's few things in educational research that are as clear as the benefits of later start times for secondary school students. You can see some of the implications there. There's a reduction in tardiness and absences, which links then to the outcomes. And finally, there's a reduced likelihood of car crashes. This is a very serious statistic, and I think it's worth noting not just car crashes driving to school, which said on the slide. I saw some increasing evidence over the weekend about research about car accidents later in the day or even in the evening as students have been up for an extended period of time. The link that is in the chat, if you click on the research, the reason it's in green, it's a hyperlink. There's about, I don't know, 8 or 10 research articles for those of you who like to read academic research. I find it really fascinating on this topic. And then there's a CDC chart that also kind of talks about some of the other well-being implications about physical activity, social emotional health, and others. This was a slide put together by a colleague of mine on the Cape, and coming from research, just really fascinating piece about their circadian wake-up time. You can see that as students get older, they are naturally going to wake up later. We're having a student town hall, by the way, on Wednesday, and I'm going to try to get some quantitative data as well as some qualitative data from our middle school and high school students on this topic. I'm really curious what they tell me. You can see that ideally we can't start school at 11 o'clock, we can't meet that ideal start time for our older students. Many of you are parents and you've recognized that as students get older, they do need to sleep later. And so what we realize is that with the wake up time that we have in our current situation, for our secondary school students, they're not only losing a little bit at the end of their sleep cycle is literally being interrupted 5 days a week. That if they're naturally going to sleep till 8 or 9 o'clock and they're waking up between 6 and 7, that's REM sleep. That's high quality sleep that our students need that they're not getting. So our current situation is that prior to the school year, our drop-off time was about 7:30 at the regional schools. And class first bell ring is 7:45. Our first bus pickup is 6:37 to make that work. We have 7 buses that have a first pickup at the regional level before 7 a.m. And there's bus stops in each of our 4 towns at the regional level that start before 7 in the morning. It's not just Shutesbury and Leverett. At the elementary, our bus drops are about 8:30, and we have 5 buses that start with pickup time before 8 o'clock. The current school year with the COVID impacted schedule, we have this 9 o'clock start time at the secondary schools. And one of the reasons, frankly, we're having the conversation is that I can't have a conversation with a middle school or high school student where this topic doesn't come up. Often in the lens of, are we really going back to a 7:45 start time next year because of the implications that they're experiencing with the later start time? So just some quick data. We have more of it, but didn't want to overwhelm with the number of slides. Last year, the 113 days that school was in session. At the high school, 7% of students were the average on an average day, 7% of students were tardy daily. I think it's also worth noting that was increasing throughout the year. In other words, the month of September, that number was a lot lower. And as we hit winter, that number was steadily increasing. So I think it's almost underreporting the level of tardy, but 7% is a lot of students to report on a daily basis. Additionally, anecdotally, staff and students report lower engagement in those 8 period classes, the first period class of the day, and that's true at both the middle school and high school. So we have a couple options for next year. One is we could revert back to our prior schedule, start at 9, instead of starting at 9, go to 7:45 for the secondary schools, and same schedule for elementary. The other option we're pursuing is to flip the time. So that means the elementary would be before the secondary schools. And that would mean buses arriving around 8:10 at the elementary level. So that's about 25 minutes earlier than they currently do, and secondary schools about 9:05. We did look at pushing just the school schedules back, but our partners in Shutesbury and Leverett at those elementary schools, it's not feasible for a whole host of reasons to push their schedule back. So really, we have these 2 options that we're pursuing, and school committee does expect to, gather feedback and make a decision for the next school year, the first week of March. So why are we talking about this now? If it comes up all the time, there's certainly not a short supply of other things to work on. Really good article about John Mehta last month in the New York Times. There's a hyperlink to this in the document that's in the chat. But one of the things that we're recognizing is we've already made tremendous adjustments this year to schedules, to start times, and we're more flexible than perhaps we thought we were. And we've learned a lot. Some lessons of what's working, some lessons, frankly, of what's not working. One of the things that we are hearing is that what is working at the secondary level is having a later start time. And so we think it is an opportunity to pursue that. It is a short timeline to make that decision, but we have now data back, mostly qualitative. We'll get quantitative next week about how this is going and how it's impacting our students on a daily basis. Other communities are doing the same. I see those questions. I'll probably get to those after. There's only a couple more slides. In Northampton, they made this change for the next school year. They voted last month. And you can see Proposal A and Proposal B are flips to their start time schedule, or their schedule, with the elementary starting first. And this was the overall results. I think this is all on their website. It's a public document. Every single stakeholder group in Northampton advocated for having the elementary schools start first, given the data and what they were hearing from secondary school students. And so this is the aggregate data, but it was true among students, parents, guardians, as well as staff members, and they opted for Proposal A. Oh, I should say, I can do this while this slide's up, that there's 8 Metro West districts who also made similar changes of pushing the start time of their secondary schools back the year before. So that we're not the trendsetters or the only people looking at late start times. Again, across the country, many people, but within Massachusetts, we've seen a shift to this in the last 2 or 3 years. Here are some of the local implications on logistics in the schedule. So at the elementary schools, it means we'll have earlier bus runs, probably again about 20, 25 minutes earlier than what they were previously, as stated earlier. We are looking and engaging with our aftercare programs about additional hours and perhaps additional demand, because dismissal looks about 2:40, 2:45. Again, basically at the elementary level, everything pushes up about 20 or 25 minutes, both in the morning and the afternoon. At the regional schedule, we're looking at a later dismissal, again, around 3:30. Our transportation department's working on actively fine-tuning these numbers, but this is where we are at this point. We are looking at revising the schedules to reduce transition times. In other words, keeping the same amount of instructional hours, but reducing the non-instructional hours to shrink the length of the day so students can get out a bit earlier. Part of that is looking at our bus schedule. I will say that we are looking to reduce pickup locations and reduce the number of bus stops, primarily at the regional level, but we've dug in and we're looking at the elementary level as well. What we notice compared to our partner districts is we have many more stops for the same number of students. And many of these stops involve 3 bus stops, each 200 yards away from one another, with no crosswalk or cross street or no dangerous pickup. Our school committee policy lists how many miles we can ask students to walk to a bus stop, which is, I believe, 2. We're nowhere close to that, and we are looking to, 3 reasons. 1, it'll reduce the time between the 2 runs, the elementary run and the secondary run. The second reason is it's consistent with our local peers. Third reason is environmentally. When you start and stop all the time, that's adding a lot to our carbon footprint. And finally, we look at equity, and we look at students living in high-density houses and how long they have to walk versus single-family homes. And right now, what we've discovered is we have some inequities that we need to address in that regard as well. So we are looking at pickup locations, which would contribute to perhaps shrinking that time between the runs. Certainly athletics is a huge deal, as Ms. Stewart can attest to, and all of us on the line can attest to. And the high school in particular is looking at some dynamic schedules where the end of the day might have more flexibility, where right now athletics don't start before 3 o'clock. And we think we can either maintain that or adjust it a bit, where athletics might have to start a little bit later, but not as much as what we originally feared, not as much as what we thought about in 2011 and 2012 when this came up. So we do think there'll be a low impact on athletics. And many thanks to Sam, Mickey, Talib, and others at the high school who are actively looking at kind of more creative schedules and how to make the end of the day have more flexibility the way the beginning of the day does right now. So students typically get there at 8:30, classes start till 7:45. Can we build in some flexibility at the end of the day at the high school to make that happen? We believe that we can. We also are concerned about staff schedules. We want to make as minor changes as possible to make sure that we can offer instruction and safety throughout the day. So we are actively looking at what that would mean. And we had a staff town hall last week, and I continue to receive feedback on that topic. So we are looking to engage the larger community. For those of you who don't know, I'm not going to read the whole list, but CPAC is a Special Education Parent Advisory Council. BPAC is a Bilingual Parent Advisory Council. PGOs are parent guardian organizations. We are engaging our partner districts in Shutesbury and Leverett. We care deeply about their input on this. I'm not the superintendent. I don't work for those communities, but they partner with us. They share bus runs, which saves everyone, is to everyone's financial benefit. So we are having town halls like this. We are having some focus groups with some of the groups I mentioned earlier. We're having some surveys. I'll talk about that in a second. And we're looking for this engagement to happen, essentially in the next month. So it's a big push at this point in time, but we think it's the right push. This needs to be updated a little bit, which I need to do this morning, but you can see that we have a date scheduled for a focus group at CPAC. We could get BPAC and some of the other groups on there. I know Marta is working with the PGOs and the Family Center Advisory Group. But we are continually doing feedback cycles with staff, with the community, and we'll have a survey out on Wednesday afternoon, which tries to get quantitative and qualitative feedback from all stakeholder groups, students, secondary students, families, and staff members about this idea and about why they think the way they think and what are potential barriers to either of the options that we're looking at. And finally, these are 5 professional groups who endorsed an 8:30 or late start time for secondary school. And what you'll see again in the presentation, which the hyperlink has, is the link to their position papers. So this one I will read because I think anytime the American Medical Association, the Center for Disease Control, American Academy of Pediatricians, Society of Behavioral Medicine, and American Psychological Association all come out with position papers on something, I think it's incumbent on us to at least explore what we can do here and how we can help. So I tried to be succinct with that because I think, as I said at the beginning, I wanted there to be much more question and answer than presentation. And so I think we'll have a 2-to-1 ratio of that today. So that should be good. And let me remove this from there and open it up for question, feedback, and comments. So I see that there's one here. Is the 9:05 the bus arrival time or the school start time? What would that look like for the ending time? So again, we're hoping to get that as close to 9 o'clock as we can, and we are envisioning that students would head straight to class instead of having that kind of bubble time that they do now, and that would be much more on the back end. So we are shooting for about a 3:30, 3:35 end time. Again, those are things that are in progress in terms of exploration, depending how much we can shrink the bus routes. And we think we've made some good success of some of our longest ones now. I think we have a couple that are this year would have been slated to be over 50 minutes, and we're all under 50 minutes at this point. We're seeing how close we can cut it. But, I think roughly 9 to 3:30 is the general idea, and we'll see if we're able to get there as we redo bus routes. And at the elementary level, again, we're thinking about 2:40, 2:45 because we're starting that much earlier. So again, at the bottom right, you can just post a comment or a question, and we want to hear from the community, from all of you. Appreciate you coming in the morning. Any thoughts you have that you'd like to share with us or any questions about this? We know it's a very large topic that would influence everyone. While in giving people time to put in some questions, we want to note and acknowledge that the earlier start time at the elementary level may be welcomed by some. We know that how late our elementary schools start is hard for some families right now, and for others it will create challenges. And that's the same true at the secondary level. There are early birds who are up at 6 in the morning, even though their circadian rhythms probably or wake up would say different on a medical document. We know there are students who get up earlier, and so we know that it's imperfect. There's no way to solve everybody's sleep cycles, but we think this may be worth exploring. Are the elementary schools prepared for after-school programs? Will they be free? So we're fortunate to have our 3 providers in our district. All of them do use subsidies, so it would be extending the day perhaps by 20 or 25 minutes, and we would imagine that the same providers would be working in the same way as they do now. And I'm just going to go in order of what I see. What is the time frame making a decision on this, and how will the union be involved? Many elementary parents reliance on aftercare babysitters. The aftercare programs need to have time to plan. That's exactly right. So the time frame making decision, I think, was one of the earlier slides, but the school committee plans to vote on this in the first week in March. And, this would be perhaps impact bargaining with our union if we change schedules. And that's why, again, Dr. Guevara is connecting with the aftercare programs for exactly the reason you said, to make sure they have time to plan and can build capacity. An elementary dismissal of 2:45 is really early for working parents of elementary school students. Will there be sufficient room in after-school programs for those who need it? And again, that's where working with our aftercare programs to expand it is something that's on our list and is actively in place right now. In general, the aftercare programs do well. The more students who attend, the more capacity they have. So we have not had a problem in the past with overcapacity at after-school programs. The challenge much more is when it's under capacity in terms of their ability to run effective programming. I really like the whole idea. It makes a lot of sense. Can you comment on why we require athletics to adjust somewhat to the new schedule? So I don't know if Mickey, Sam, or Victoria would want to jump in, but I will bring them in and then they can choose who jumps in on this one.
Yeah, I'll take that. So really the only reason why athletics needs to require athletics to adjust somewhat to this new schedule. We typically have practices at 3 o'clock or 3:15. However, when we travel to games, student athletes need to be there around 3 o'clock. So we normally have to sometimes get out early at 2:20, right before we normally get out this year. So next year would have to be the same. We'd have to get out early and leave block 4 earlier than normal.
And Sam or Mickey, would you like anything you want to add on that one? Okay, sounds good. And making elementary school start earlier, make the end of the day earlier. Parents are offering work schedules around 3:10 dismissal when employers expect a 9 to 5 workday. And then this continues, I think. How are you reaching out to major employers like UMass and Amherst College to ensure their employees will be supportive of possible change? That's a great question. I'm going to put that on a list of things to do to reach out. I think we do want to reach out to employers, and I think we're between UMass, Amherst College, and the districts I work for, those are the 3 biggest employers in town, and it's a great idea, and we'll take that advice and be able to and put that into place. Thank you. How would this affect course offering scheduling? I'm concerned with the current situation where we only have math and language arts language one semester versus across the whole school year. It certainly could. It's a related but different conversation, and some of that is really around COVID and looking at COVID. The reason we went to a block schedule at the high school this year wasn't around a larger question about the schedule. It was about how do we reduce the number of exposures, possible exposures that kids have. We don't really know at this point what vaccination rates we'll have for students under the age of 18. As many of you know, that vaccines aren't going down that young, right, to people that young right now. And we don't know what that's going to look like in the fall. So we may be in a situation where we want to explore the block for a whole host of reasons. Northampton, for instance, does have a block schedule, has for many years, and they've had a lot of success with that. I'm not ready to make that determination, but I think, while I'm optimistic around vaccination, the fact that there are trials going on for children under 18 is fantastic. We don't know exactly where we'll be when we get to fall. So there's some of it's the general schedule and some of it's actually around COVID and understanding what the implications of running a schedule are and what are potential exposures and need for quarantine. So we may still be in that world in the fall. Sorry to be pessimistic perhaps on that, but that is part of our thinking. Does the condensing of the middle school, high school affect a time students have to eat lunch? I've heard you're considering allowing only 20 minutes for lunch. Is that healthy for students? So I've not been part of any conversation in which we're considering 20 minutes for lunch. I'm happy to disavow the rumor, but I'm glad you brought it up that it's really around transitions. How many transitions do we have during the course of the school day? If we are still considering a block schedule, that's fewer transitions than if we're in a 7-drop-1 schedule throughout the day, and those minutes add up. So I've not been part of any conversations about lunch. Already had one situation this year where school committee voted on something, parents started planning, and everything changed with union negotiations. No question, just sharing a concern. Thanks for sharing it. How can you speak more to how athletics will be affected, especially winter sports? How would this affect children's ability to attend after-school help and athletics? So perhaps I'll get our I'll include Diego in this. our team here. And if there's more to add, particularly with the 3 p.m. Start time for athletics now and what potentially it looked like in the past.
Yeah, so right now students are typically affected by this. So they aren't penalized though if they have to come to practice late. So they can still stay after school during any of those times as well, and just let their coach know that they're going to be late, just so they know where they're at.
Mickey, Sam, anything you want to add in terms of some thinking that is currently going on this topic?
So I'll just add that the flip start time is one factor, but the schedule that we're in next year we're mapping out both types of schedules, the 7-drop one, and we're mapping out a 4x4 block, which is what Northampton's using. And with the 4x4 block, we actually get all 4 blocks in by 3 o'clock, which allows the flex block that often exists in block schedules to occur between 3 and 3:30, which would allow flexibility for students across the high school, whether they're athletes or whether they do ALPS or they do, which is our alternative learning program, where we really promote experiential learning, internships, classes. So with the block, we do get that extra half hour from 3 to 3:30. If we go with the 7-drop one, and again, this is just, the COVID certainly has implications for this, but the 7-drop one would actually require all 6 classes to meet, and that 6th class wouldn't end until 3:30. So there are more implications with athletes who have to leave school early, that in the block, they would, if they have to leave at 3 o'clock, they wouldn't miss an actual course. And so those are just some of the factors that certainly contribute to this entire decision.
Yep, and really good clarification by Ellen. Thank you. And I should have been more clear in my comments that vaccines, one of them, I believe, is available for students 16 and older. However, high school has a wider age range than that. So we don't exactly know what the fall will look like with that, but it's a really important clarification. I don't want anyone who has a 17-year-old thinking that there's not any options in the future in terms of vaccines. So thank you, Ellen, for that. My apologies for not being clear. All right, we'll give, again, we have plenty of time on this topic. And so give it a little bit of time if anyone has additional questions that come in. While people are thinking, Marta, do you mind just speaking to, I know I spoke a little bit to it, but if there's anything you want to add on the after-school programs or aftercare programs, I wondered if you're able to comment on that, because that is a very real concern for elementary families.
Yeah, so we are fortunate that we have that we work so closely and so well with our providers. We've already have a preliminary meeting with current providers, and we're meeting again today. And so we're really very positive about the possibility of being able to support as many students as need be. And so we have to consider many different other options. So it could be, by hour option and other matters. So we're excited whichever way the community and the school committee obviously, vote for this, and we will be ready.
Thank you so much, Dr. Guevara.
Mm-hmm.
Just positive piece of feedback. So for your high school folks, and I'm sure we'll get a lot of feedback on this when we do the survey as well, just about the impact of that schedule. So thank you. Mr. Shea, since you've been quiet and we're waiting for some more people to perhaps ask questions, any thoughts from the elementary lens that you have? Or any lens you'd like to offer? You've worked at both the high school and at the elementary level, so you've got a good thought on that.
Yeah. I hesitate to offer my bias on the high school piece, given that I've got 2 children who just barely struggled to make it through 7:45 starts for the last 4 years. It's not an easy thing for young people to be up at the crack of dawn and then heading to school. But in terms of elementary school, look, our buses arrive right now anywhere between 8:25 and 8:30, and so I hear you say that the buses would be arriving closer to 8:10. We certainly have teacher meetings in the morning, but I think those teacher meetings would perhaps switch to the afternoon. And I agree with Dr. Guevara. We have a very healthy, strong after-school program here, and I certainly believe and would hope that they would be interested in if they needed to add further students to the after school roster.
Thanks. Just a piece of feedback about the middle school, the way the middle school schedule has been shifted this year for wanted to share. And so we'll give another minute or two. Certainly, if there's more questions, and we may get a bigger crowd in the evening. There's, for those of you who don't know, there's a 6:30, same kind of thing, different link, but the same slides. Everything else will be the same about it. Also, this link that everyone's on the YouTube is good indefinitely. So if someone missed this session and you want to share this link and you found it helpful, please do share either the link to the presentation or the link to this live stream. But we'll give it another minute or two. I know people still perhaps finishing their coffee and other things. So we'll give people a second and see if there's any other comments that come through. Thank you. Thanks for that comment. And, I think what we found this year, in addition to all the other things that make the paper perhaps more often, is that having a little more focused time and fewer classes is making a difference for our students. And we imagine that would be true in person or in the current virtual format that we're in. So really appreciate all the work that staff members, those on this call, those not on this call, teachers who contributed to the drafting of those schedules. I think it's obviously a hard situation this year. I don't want to minimize that, but I do appreciate the thoughtfulness of our educators to come up with the best possible kind of schedule design given the situation. And just another comment. I'm not going to read them all, but yeah, it's interesting about the sports. I mean, I will say that some places, and I'm cautious of my words on this, but I think I want to be transparent about it. Some places have, for certain sports who have made a flip, some of the sports do happen in the morning, based on availability of facilities, if they're not using our facilities at the school. And, I guess that is an option, for those students. But I think the big thing for me is it's an option. You don't have to play a sport. And I'm saying this as I played sports in high school and college. I care deeply about athletics and making a huge difference. But when I think about all students, the reason we're engaging in this is because we think it'll have an impact on all students. And for students who wake up early, great. Maybe they're doing some of their homework in the morning instead of staying up late at night. But, the evidence is pretty clear on this one. All right, since I don't see additional questions or comments coming in, again, I'll put my email address in here. Please feel free, for those of you who are more comfortable sharing confident, feedback that's not so public, please feel free to shoot me an email. If you want to shoot the school committee an email, I'll put that email address on here or questions, please keep them coming. We appreciate you starting the day with us. Again, if you think of other questions, you can shoot that email. You could also join again. We'll be here at 6:30 and hope everyone has a great day. Thank you very much. There's one more comment. Thanks, Renata. But thinking about math and language, yeah, that's exactly right. And that's something, some of the conversations we're having about, does that work for all students and how do we do the math? And literacy. My question above was not addressed. Sorry, I'll go back if I missed one. Oh, sorry, Carrie, I missed that one. Is there a way to do a 4x4 block that allows for math and language across the years? Problematic students can go a full year without math. They only have fall and then the spring. So I will defer to our, particularly our high school folks, Sam and Mickey, on that topic if you have anything you'd like to add.
Yeah, I can speak to this. There's several different ways to do a block schedule. One version is an AB block, which does allow for all courses to meet, all eight blocks to meet every other day over the course of the year. That's certainly a schedule where if there's strong, if what community values is having courses all year, then very often that's the block that people go with. If instead the community, the majority, because again, you have to choose like what's your value and what are you creating, because every schedule has strengths and weaknesses. And so the 4x4 block that runs in a semester format, that's exactly what you lose, is that continuity. But if you're trying to reduce the focus at one time for students, then schools tend to opt for the semester. So those are going to be the conversations that we have to have. It also, when you look at caseload and you look at how many students a teacher has at once, variables that stem from those kinds of things. This is, and there's a lot of literature now that you can read about studies on the blocks and all the different kinds of blocks. There's also 4x4 blocks with semesters where school districts will choose high need courses, both at the AP level and at more of the remedial level, or level where students might be somewhat behind. So for example, they might year-long block AP BC calculus, and they might year-long have like an algebra course or a ways to do that. And that's going to have to be a conversation when we choose next year's schedule that will have to also involve stakeholders.
Thank you, Mickey. That's an incredibly helpful answer, and one that I definitely couldn't have said in the level of detail that you did. So I appreciate you saying that. And I think that brings up a really good point to perhaps end on is, we started engaging this conversation late this fall. We are going to, school committee's going to have to make a decision before every bus run is created. We don't frankly know exactly who our students are going to be next year. So it's hard to really have firm bus runs when we don't exactly know who's going to join us. We don't know who the kindergartners are, and we don't know the transients in and out. But we're trying to see if we have a general sense with these general parameters, and we will have to work out details like Mickey talked about over time and engage stakeholders throughout. Do we know how teachers union feel about this? That's why we're having, we started, our first engagement was with teachers, with educators last week. And so we'll continue to do that. If you look towards the end of the slide deck, there's additional engagements with each school staff. Starting next week, we'll have survey data. So we're going to have a tremendous amount of information about how teachers feel about this, and we'll continue to engage that question. Give me a second. I'm scrolling down to see a couple of comments. But I think time will tell when we survey folks how people feel in the community, and that includes teachers. I want to thank everybody for joining us this morning. Again, back at 6:30. If there's additional questions or other people couldn't make it this morning, Mandy Jo, the survey will be up for all secondary students to complete, so 7th through 12th grade students. We are trying to think about a way to engage upper elementary students. When we get down to the primary grade levels, just developmentally, it's a little hard to engage students in this dialogue. But we are trying to think actively about ways to engage upper elementary students. But the survey itself will be for 7th through 12th grade students and all staff members and all families in the district. Sorry if I wasn't clear about that before. It's a really, really important point. We have engaged too, Mickey and Sam. I don't know if Sam, you want to mention some of the engagement you did on the front end, because I think that's helpful to hear.
Are you talking about student groups? Student groups?
Exactly.
Yeah. So we have a student advisory council that we've been consulting with, and then a POCU group that also we've surveyed. And so we're getting a lot of feedback from them and their thoughts, and Superintendent Morris will follow up with them as well. So we're gonna keep working on that for sure.
Yeah. So Carrie, I see electives sacrifice for a degree in the block schedule. I'm going to make this probably the last question, but I'll, my short answer, and Mickey and Sam can expand on it, is we've had a block schedule this year, and we've offered, the similar elective. We've had an even more modified block schedule than we would have potentially into next year. We've offered the slate of electives that we typically would. Mickey, Sam, anything more that you want to say on that topic?
I just want to mention that the electives will be broken into quarters no matter what schedule we go with. And so in a block schedule, you actually have 8 blocks instead of 7. So depending on the 5 core academics and whether or not some of them need to be year long or not, it can actually increase elective offerings for students.
Thanks, Mickey. Thank you very much. Again, thanks for joining us for this call. Thanks for our folks who are really busy for joining the call. So Derek, Marta, Sam, Victoria, Diego, Mickey, appreciate you being on this call. And be on the lookout for our survey Wednesday afternoon. I think we're giving folks a week to do it. It's a very short survey this time around. Hopefully that's enough time. We are doing presentations in Spanish. It's being dubbed, so something that will be like this will be sent out. The slide deck is already available in Spanish, so we are trying to send out all this information and hit as many stakeholders in a busy time and an unusual time as we can. But the more you can engage, have friends say, "Oh, it was interesting. If you're around at 6:30, you might want to do it. It'll be cold. It's not a good night for the bonfire," or whatever else people are potentially doing at night. I'm not sure what that is these days. Please do help us with that, and we'll be in touch with that data. All the data we collect, as well as these videos, is always transparent. It's always shared with the public, and really good feedback and some next steps for us to do based on your ideas. Have a good one. Thanks so much.